All right, so let's continue on to our second topic, and that is New York City begins their probe in third-party delivery. Now, this is huge, at least I believe, even though it is not initiated by the New York State Restaurant Association. This is initiated by what could be the very first time ever that a city has started to look into the business practices of third-party delivery services. But a group called the New York City Hospitality Alliance, this is kind of driven by Andrew Ridgey, who is the executive director over there. They're an industry trade group. And basically what they're saying is they want the city to take a look at some of the things that are happening in third parties. So one of the points that I thought was a little unusual, I'm not sure that this is happening, or maybe they have some information that we have not seen or seen in research, and that is, should delivery services be allowed to set up bogus websites similar to in name and in style to an actual restaurant? I don't know that this has actually happened. Now, in New York, it's possible that there could be some shenanigans going on that has caused this to be on kind of the hitting point of this particular alliance. It'll be interesting to see how the city kind of responds to this. The other thing is financial factors, and this is one that I think does fall into some of the things with third-party delivery, and that is that it does financial factors. In other words, pay to play doesn't determine where a restaurant is listed in third-party apps. Mobile programs. So if restaurants are spending a certain amount of money, now there was some issues with Uber where they were doing promoted listings based on offerings that you were doing to drive sales. That'll be interesting to see of whether or not that's actually happening in New York at any scale. But at least they are pressing to make sure that this does not happen. Now, here's one that is happening and is one that I think is of high concern to the restaurant industry and every restaurant operator out there, and that is who owns the information on a restaurant customer's order. If you look at Uber's point of view, it's their app. They've acquired that customer in a way, and they've essentially got all the data, your credit card information, your ordering habits, a lot of your personal information, where you are pretty much any time of day. Through their geolocation capability. And this really starts to represent a challenge, I think, for the industry, because the restaurant industry has kind of grown on the ability to understand their guests. And if you understand your guests, you've got to be able to do it through data. And that will be the telling point. If Uber, Grubhub, and the likes start to release that data or share that information over to these operators, I think that would be a big, huge move in being able to keep those alliances between the restaurant operators and the third-party delivery services somewhat at bay. Another one is, can a service mandate that a restaurant not use any other third-party? This is a deal that is happening today. A lot of exclusive programs are happening now. Grubhub is doing a lockout of other services. Uber Eats probably still trying to do the same thing. Essentially, that's kind of asking for an exclusivity. I don't know that there's a way around that, because I think you're going to be, as a supplier, a third-party delivery company, you're going to be giving up something to get that exclusivity. So if the restaurant is willing to do that, it's a fair trade, in my opinion, and I think both parties win in that kind of scenario. So I don't necessarily see that being a factor that they're going to get through. And then, does the prominence and penetration of the third-party delivery services constitute a restraint of trade? Now, this is the one that I think really is overreaching and is way out there. I am very pro-restaurant industry, and so much that I believe that there are some challenges within third-party. We'll get a chance to talk about that. But to actually consider this as a restraint of trade, I just don't see that as a possibility at all. Every restaurant operator has the choice to sign up with these services or not. Sure, it does put some pressure on you because your buddy down the street or your competitor down the street is in Uber Eats or Grubhub and you aren't getting that kind of exposure. Listen, it's a trade-off, and like anything in the restaurant business, you've got to either get better at doing something that can compete, or you kind of have to join the herd mentality, and that is get in on third-party delivery. So I'm not sure if this is going to be one to take it. Here's my analysis. If we look at a few things, if you look at where the industry is going and whether or not it has a sustainable future, we looked at this last November, and it's kind of an interesting factor because I believe that there is some contributing points here to third-party delivery that is actually hurting the restaurant industry. So I want to cut to this video from last November on our take on third-party delivery. Now let's also look at some of the data points that I put together over this week that kind of connects the dots to something that I think is a very striking issue in the restaurant business, and that is that Uber may actually be charged with causing restaurants to close. Let's break this down in a few things. First is a study. A recent study conducted by CHD shows that restaurant brands are actually pushing down the accelerator when it comes to specific on-delivery or on-demand delivery and a variety of off-premise channels. Let's take a look at the talking points of this. And the takeout and pickup is projected at generating about $124 billion in sales this year. Now, this is estimated at 20% of overall sales for restaurant operations. When we look at this data, we think there's some big sectors because takeout with direct delivery from a restaurant is around $32 billion. Takeout with delivery from a third-party delivery service company is around $13 billion, according to this report. Now, this is where I think it gets interesting. With CHD's report, not that it's wrong, but we actually see that there's a significant variance from our data that is showing about $32 billion in third-party delivery potentials for the restaurant industry. And this breaks down into about 318,000 restaurants that are participating in third-party delivery. This is estimated at around 48% of total restaurants in the U.S. So when you look at the overall ecosystem, think 1 and 2 restaurants are out there doing third-party on-demand delivery, Uber being the leader of the pack, along with others that have really kind of showed the way. Finally, you look at catering, which is coming in around $40 billion. So as you can see, food away from home is exploding, and on-demand delivery, especially in third party, is really beginning to shift the entire landscape of where restaurant is today. Now, let's take a look at a couple of slides here that are related to restaurant closings. And this one is kind of interesting. As of October 31st of this year, we are estimating around 62,000 restaurants have closed to date. Now, this also goes back to a trend prediction that we did earlier this year that we thought we would see about 80,000 restaurant closures. At current pace, we estimate that this will be on track with my original predictions, which were around the 80K mark. We'll dig in a little deeper to this and kind of talk about where this closure relates to on-demand delivery. So let's look at Uber Eats in relationship to the overall operators that are using them. Remember, 48% of the industry using on-demand delivery. Uber Eats, the leader of the pack. What we found was that 32% of those on-demand deliveries were actually coming through Uber Eats. Now, here's the interesting thing. The closures that we had and saw in this data were grafted against data from Uber Eats delivery. So we were looking at restaurants and consumers that were talking about Uber Eats delivery from these specific restaurant closings. Out of those, 32% of those restaurants actually used Uber Eats of the ones that closed. So this is very well in line with the overall data of where the industry closures are occurring from. In short, what this simply means is Uber Eats and their fees actually causing a challenge to the restaurant business, especially around the cost ratio of what restaurant points are. So when you look at where your profits are in food service today, it doesn't necessarily equate with about the 30% or so charge that Uber charges. So when you look at the Uber effect that is impacting the restaurant business, around 19,000 restaurants that closed out of the 62K, and that's up through October, which equals about 1.3 restaurants per day. Not a huge number, but definitely a number that we need to be looking at. And I think this is the thing that is most important around the Uber Eats issue, and really whether or not restaurants are going to be able to handle the challenges that on-demand delivery continue to play, both from a consumer standpoint, but also from an aspect of just the operational ability to be able to put this out there into the market and still make a profit. All right, so as you can see there, even back in November of last year, 2018, we were looking at the entire business model of Uber When you look at the fees, you look at the services to both the guest and the operator, this starts to really create what is and can be an unsustainable business model unless Uber is making some significant moves to change their entire model for Uber Eats. I don't know that this is necessarily going to happen when you look at the overall traffic of third-party delivery. And this is some data points that I want to kind of break down here. It's a little wonky because we're comparing the last 6 months, which has been up 12.9% in comparison to the last full year of data, which was 2018, which was up year over year from 2017, 32.9%. So if you kind of look at the trajectory of growth, even if we get the next half of our 6 months at a pace in which we've had so far, and there's no decline, we're still around 25% growth over last year. So we would start to see a decline in activity on third-party delivery from consumers. So if that is in fact happening, and we do, and the data does suggest that that is occurring, we could start to see the backside of a bell curve that is starting to occur for on-demand. The other factors that come into this are the players. And if you look at Grubhub, they continue to really grow through acquisition. They have been a company that's been on a mission to acquire a lot of technology companies that are assisting restaurants and operators. And I think maybe they have some potential issues of maybe seeing the writing on the wall, or at least understanding that the profitability is not necessarily going to come from third-party delivery, or that it could face some challenges as restaurant operators begin to create new models. And when I say new models of delivery for guests to get their food away from home. So I still believe, though, that Uber is and has to get into the restaurant business. And I think I don't know that they've actually pulled the trigger to try to create brands yet, but if they are going to make this work, at some point they have to kind of self-supply, which begs you to the point of the data and the amount of data that they have on all the restaurant industry guests that have participated so far. It's only natural. I mean, if I were Uber, that would be the play I would go with. It just makes perfect sense. Now you're a publicly traded company. You've got your fiduciary responsibility to your stockholders to grow the business, and this is going to be one that I think is an opportunity. I still believe, though, that we are going to be in a very precarious situation with on-demand delivery for the many coming years. There will be a lot of changes in the restaurant industry to deal with this because the consumers aren't necessarily slowing down. I think they're just going to be looking for other alternatives. I talked to a friend of mine, I won't use the brand, but he and I were talking about this. He's a CEO of a multi-unit chain right here in Miami. And we got into this point of he was actually comparing Grubhub Postmates and Uber Eats. So the way that he did it was he offered a special on Postmates that he didn't offer on Uber. Same menu, same guest group. But what he found is his delivery percentages were significantly higher on Postmates because of the offer. So what he said to me, clearly the customer is looking for the best deal. They're not necessarily tied to one delivery app or another. So there's still, that says something. That has huge power because that tells you that the guest is still your guest, the restaurant operator. They're coming to your restaurant. They're just trying to figure out the best way that they can get to your food.